Welcome back. So far, we have seen how we can query in a database a single table and get back specific columns from this table, potentially rename these columns and manipulate the order in which the results are appearing. Now, we are going to shift our focus to the where part of the select statement, which is being used for specifying which rows we want to appear back in the results. The syntax of the where statement is the following. We have, as usually, the select in the first line of SQL, followed by the list of attributes, then from the table that we are querying, and after the from part, we have the where clause, followed by a condition, and then we have the order by and the limit commands that we have seen before. We are going now to spend some time discussing various types of conditions for the where clause, but let's start with a simple form of a condition, which is an equality. When we have an equality condition, we compare an attribute to a particular value, and we ask in the query to return back only rows for which this condition is true. So, for example, we might have a condition gender is equal to male, which specifies that we want back rows from the table where the attribute gender has the value male. Notice that when we are comparing an attribute against a piece of text and the attribute is textual, in that case we need to enclose the textual value, in that case male, within quotes. Another example of an equality condition might be year is equal to 2006, where we specify that we want back rows where the attribute year has the value 2006. Notice that since the year is a numeric attribute, we do not enclose the value 2006 in quotes. Now, let's do a couple of examples. So let's go to the IMDb database first. So use IMDb, and we want to find a movie in the movies table with ID 64729. So how do we write this query using where? So we start with select star from movies, select star because we want all the attributes, and then from movies because we want to get information about the movie. Now we want and write the where clause. So after the from movies, we type where ID is equal to 64729. So we want back the row where the attribute ID is equal to 64729. Now, we execute the query, and you'll see that we get back the result, which is the movie Citizen Kane, which was released in year 1941 and has a rating of 8.7. Notice that the ID is 64729, which is the condition that we added in the query. Let's do another example. We want to find the entry for the movie Pulp Fiction. So in this case, we want to query not for the ID attribute, but we want to query on the name attribute. So we write select star from movies, and now we need to add our condition. So we go where name is equal to quote Pulp Fiction, closing quote. So notice that the value Pulp Fiction is text, so we include the name Pulp Fiction in quotes. So we execute our query and we get back the movie entry with ID 267038 for the movie Pulp Fiction that was released in year 1994 and has a rating of 8.7. Now let's try to retrieve another movie. We want to get back the entry for the movie Schindler's List. It seems very similar to the case of Pulp Fiction, so let's see what happens if we try to write the query in the same style, right? So we go and we type select star from movies where name is equal to open quotes Schindler's List, closing quote. Take a look at the query now. In the editor, you will see that the query even visually doesn't look right. You know, the coloring is a little bit messed up. So what's the problem? The problem that we have is the quote character in Schindler's List, which is inside the name of the movie. So what happens is SQL, as it is reading this condition, it reads, and when it encounters the quote within Schindler's List, it says, okay, that's it, that's the end of the entry for this piece of text. So the command ends here. Then SQL continues reading and says, well, there are a few characters that follow Schindler, which ends with quote, and I don't know what these characters are doing, so it raises a flag and we get back a syntax error when SQL tries to execute this query. So the question is, how can we deal with this error, right? There are two ways that we can fix this issue. The first one is, instead of using single quotes, we can write Schindler's List within double quotes. So we type where name is equal to double quote Schindler's List, closing the double quote. So now we use double quotes to enclose the text value that is using a single quote, and the single quote is deemed to be part of the text. You will see that even visually, the query now looks more consistent. So we run our query and get back the entry for Schindler's List. So this technique works. We just need to make sure that we are using double quotes to enclose a string that using single quotes, and vice versa. If you have a string with double quotes, you may want to use single quotes to surround it. There is another technique that we can use that we call escaping, which works as follows. So we say from movies where name is Schindler's List, we enclose it in single quotes, but now before the quote character, the single quote character in Schindler's List, we put the backslash character. So we write now our string as Schindler backslash single quote S list. And now this backslash character indicates that the quote character is not marking the end of the string, but it's actually part of the string. So we call this backslash character the escape character, and indicates that the quote is not a special character which indicates the end of the string, but it's just a regular character that is part of the text. Again, if you try to write the query like that, the query looks visually more consistent. So if we execute now the query, we get back the results as expected. Both the approach that is using double quotes and the escape character approach of using single quotes is absolutely fine. Let's do one more query, and we'll also try to use the order by clause in our SQL query. What we want to do is we want to list all the roles for the movie with ID 290070, which is Schindler's List. For this query, we need the roles table. So we go and we type select star from roles. And now we need to add our condition, and we type where movie underscore ID is equal to 290070. If we execute the query, we get back the roles, but we also want the results to be sorted alphabetically. So now we continue and write after where order by role. And now if we execute the query, it goes into the roles table, and notice that we get back all the roles for Schindler's List, the actor IDs, and the movie ID, which is always the same, of course, in our results. Notice that the roles are ranked alphabetically based on the name of the role. This concludes our first introduction to the where queries, where you used a single condition, and this condition was an equality condition. We saw that we don't use quotes when comparing against numeric variables. However, we do need to use quotes when comparing with text values, and we have seen how we can handle quotes that appear in the text. Also remember that the where clause comes after from and before order by. Now, in our next video, we are going to learn about Boolean operators, which allow us to combine multiple conditions into the where clause. Until then, play around and practice. See you next time.